After almost 10 years, the Afghan war has entered a very critical phase. President Obama has issued instructions to add troops to the battlefield. We hope to beat back the threat of the Taliban, but it's going to be very challenging. I support the surge. I support the effort to stabilize the government and the areas in Afghanistan, but we're not going to only get a military solution. We certainly have questions about the effectiveness of the government and the corruption, which puts into question whether or not we will have a long-term partner in place to administer the peace. I think we can control the battlefield, but it's going to take more than that. Recent studies showed that we can build, for example, 20 schools for the cost of keeping one service person in Afghanistan for 1 year. I think that's going to be a primary focus for us as well. We need to build infrastructure. In a tribal society that's very decentralized, they're not going to respond to central government. We need to invest monies in building up schools, hospitals, water projects in communities around the country. They found that the communities that do invest in schools and are self-reliant are not responsive to the Taliban. They're not responsive to Al-Qaeda. What they want is to live their life. If we give them a reason to be able to move ahead by building these infrastructure projects, which are substantially less in cost than waging war, I think that's a good balance. We'll need to finish with the surge, work with the government, but also to invest substantially less money, but very effectively in infrastructure projects around the country to help stabilize it. We have no alternative but to work with China in the future. As the second largest economy in the world, as the largest in population in the world, for us on a worldwide basis to move ahead economically and with security, we will have to engage China. We are doing so economically right now. We're investing a lot of resources through our companies into the country. Do we need to modify our relationship? I think we have to be aware of our relationship. As they buy more and more of our Treasury securities, they can exert a greater pressure on us than I think I would be comfortable with, which goes back to controlling our deficit, reducing the need to borrow money from overseas, and controlling our own destiny. I think it's important to push to revise their currency, but that's not going to be the be-all and end-all right now. We've got to do things here to stimulate our economy, here to change our structural problems as well. But I do think we need to evaluate our relationship and work constructively with the communist regime in order to, for the good of the world and for the good of our future, our children, to effectively manage that relationship. One issue that wasn't discussed last night that is important to me, as an independent, I'm concerned about solutions to problems. We're discussing in Congress what to do with the Bush tax cuts. First, for me, I look at those tax cuts and say they weren't tax cuts, but tax deferrals. They were not paid for. President Bush ran up $4.5 trillion in deficits during his term. If you don't pay for tax cuts, all you are is deferring the payment of those cuts to later generations, and I think that's unconscionable. But as we move forward, the Democrats and Republicans only talk about one side of the problem. Democrats are saying we want to only tax the upper 2%. That's going to bring in $700 billion to the Treasury over the next 10 years. Unfortunately, the bottom 98% are going to get a tax cut of $2.8 trillion. If we're talking about deficits, we're not going to be able to balance the budget on the top 2%. We're not going to pay for Social Security on the top 2%, and we certainly aren't going to pay for the big deficit in Medicare. We've got to come up with a real solution that involves everybody, not just the top 2%. And just talking about the top 2% fails to acknowledge the problem. The Republicans, on the other hand, want to make the tax cuts permanent. They haven't come up with a plan to pay for it. They haven't told us what they're going to cut. I think it's great. If I have more money in my pocket, I'm very happy about that. But are they going to cut education? My wife is a special education teacher. Are they going to cut education so that we have, instead of 20 kids in a class, we're going to have 40 kids in a class? Or we're not going to have the resources to train our kids to be ready for 21st century jobs? What are they going to cut? Are they going to cut roads? Are they going to cut Homeland Security? Are they going to cut administration of justice? I mean, you know, the prisons and things around the country. What are they going to do? If you don't talk about solutions, if you only talk about one side of the problem, you're not giving an answer, and you do not have the courage as a politician to tell a voter what the real solution is to the problem. And that's what makes me different than the Republicans and the Democrats. I will talk solutions. We are in difficult times, and I think that we need honest answers for voters to make a good choice, a clear choice about who has the courage to stand up to the special interest when they go to Washington. I feel I have that. I feel by being an independent and not party loyal that I'll be able to serve the voters' interests more clearly than either my Democratic or Republican challengers. Thank you.